John wasn't just another young lawyer trying to survive in the legal world. He was the kind of person you notice, even if you don't want to admit it, who carries something special. Yet on the surface, he looked entirely ordinary, unassuming clothes, measured steps, a shy way of greeting people. The courtroom audience couldn't see the talent behind the appearance, and honestly, that only fueled his determination. He knew that being underestimated was, paradoxically, a strategic advantage that few understand. After all, how many times in life have you been surprised by someone who seemed small and turned out to be a giant? That was exactly John. He understood that every doubtful glance, every condescending smile could be transformed into fuel for his own victory. And so, between court cases and cups of coffee, he silently built his arsenal. His routine was simple but far from easy. Waking up early, reviewing documents late into the night, dealing with colleagues who rarely offered help. But he never complained. On the contrary, he turned every difficulty into a lesson. For instance, if a case seemed lost, he mentally noted every flaw in the defense or strategic mistake, storing it for future use. This kind of quiet discipline is something few young people grasp, learning to observe more than speak, to absorb more than complain. He had patience, and patience in court is worth its weight in gold. It was like planting seeds in hard soil, waiting for the right moment to bloom, and John knew that moment would come. But John didn't live for work alone. There was something in his eyes that reflected genuine curiosity about the world, a desire to understand people and their motivations. This empathy was an invisible yet powerful tool. By noticing small signs of nervousness or hesitation, he could adjust his strategies, almost like a conductor directing every movement in the courtroom. If you've studied nonverbal communication, you know what I mean. He applied these techniques intuitively, but also deliberately, reading psychology books and observing historic debates. It wasn't luck, it was preparation, discipline, and attention to details that no one else noticed. The case he was defending that week was far from simple. His client, a businessman unjustly accused of fraud, had already endured months of stress and unfounded suspicion. John knew that the narrative built against him was convincing to most, but fragile under careful scrutiny. And this is where his story becomes fascinating, recognizing the danger ahead, yet knowing there's a hidden strategic gap. Could he have been discouraged? Of course. But true talent lies in choosing to act, even when everyone around doubts you. And John was about to do exactly that. From the first day in court, John noticed the hostile atmosphere. Rival lawyers looked down on him. Judges made subtle comments about his inexperience, and each witness seemed more comfortable challenging him than cooperating. Still, he remained calm, taking deep breaths and remembering that knowledge and strategy always outweigh arrogance. One of his secrets was simple yet powerful: never react impulsively. It may seem basic, but believe me, few young lawyers can control their anxiety and turn every attack into an opportunity. He knew every move could be crucial to turning the game around. In his preparation routine, John reviewed documents, created mental maps of arguments, and even rehearsed questions and answers. He applied techniques he learned from books and courses, but also devised his own strategies. For example, he observed patterns in rival lawyers, identifying weaknesses and inconsistencies. This required patience and meticulous attention, but it was exactly the kind of work few would undertake. For him, every tiny detail was an opportunity to create surprise later, a silent strike that could change everything. And so he built the foundation of the cunning that everyone would eventually see, but only at the right moment. Despite all the effort, John felt the pressure. Being constantly underestimated isn't easy. It's a mix of frustration, anxiety, and determination. He could have given up, as many would, but there was something in his character that wouldn't allow it. an unwavering sense of justice. He believed every client deserved a true defense, that every argument should be heard carefully. And this sense of justice wasn't just professional, it was personal. He applied it in every conversation, every move, and that made him earn silent respect even when underestimated. In that courtroom, John became a silent figure, almost invisible to those who only cared about appearances. But he was far from insignificant. He understood that all attention was on his experienced and arrogant opponent, and that was perfect. Others' distraction created the ideal ground for him to act strategically. How often in life are people so blind to the obvious that they miss huge opportunities? John knew how to exploit these gaps, and his talent lay exactly in this, turning underestimation into a competitive advantage. Every step he took was calculated, yet appeared natural, almost casual. He also cultivated discreet relationships with colleagues and assistants, people who could provide valuable information without rivals suspecting a thing. This kind of silent network is often overlooked. It is not about having contacts to boast about, but creating a web of information and support that reveals itself at the right moment. He mastered this, like a strategist who knows the entire board, while others see only a piece or two. This complete vision allowed John to prepare every move with almost surgical precision, always one step ahead. As the trial day approached, John knew he would need more than talent. He would need courage, creativity, and the ability to read every situation clearly. He mentally reviewed possible scenarios, imagined every reaction, and this wasn't paranoia. It was strategic preparation. Every detail he learned about his opponents, the judges, and the case itself was a silent weapon. He understood that the courtroom is a stage, and every person there plays a role. And so, even underestimated, he prepared to transform every perceived weakness into a turning point, paving the way for the next challenge approaching. John carried a serene confidence, one that isn't announced with words, but perceived in actions. He knew that being young and underestimated was only the beginning of the narrative. The real test would come when he had to turn intelligence and strategy into action. And as he watched the courthouse corridors, feeling the tension in the air, he began planning his next moves, knowing every detail could be decisive. The story was just beginning, and the first battle was approaching, demanding not only knowledge, but cunning and courage. The courtroom felt like a silent battlefield, where every glance carried judgment, even before words were spoken. John entered the room with the calm of someone who understands that the game had already begun before the first argument. His opponent, an experienced and arrogant veteran, looked at him as if staring down an insignificant fly. But John knew the real danger lay in the subtleties. Every mocking smile, every interruption, every ironic comment was an attempt to undermine his confidence. He took a deep breath and reminded himself that underestimating a young lawyer could be fatal. There was no room for fear, only attention and strategy. Right from the start, the obstacle was clear. Evidence that seemed overwhelming was presented against his client, and the scales seemed to tilt unfairly. Hesitant witnesses, confusing documents, and subtle mistakes from the previous defense created a scenario that could discourage even the most seasoned lawyer. For anyone else, this would have been the end of the line. But John saw more than the obvious. He identified patterns, small errors and inconsistencies that no one else noticed. It was like discovering a secret door in a labyrinth. The exit is there, but few have eyes to see it. The reaction in the courtroom was palpable. Colleagues looked surprised, some spectators whispered among themselves, and rival lawyers barely hid their pleasure at seeing the young man struggle. The judge, apparently neutral, already showed signs of impatience, speeding up the proceedings. John, however, remained serene. He knew the audience and the court were reacting not only to the facts, but to their perception of him. A lawyer who loses composure loses half the battle. He took deep breaths, observed every detail, and mentally noted each behavior, turning that tension into fuel for the turnaround to come. The opponent seemed convinced the game was won. He spoke confidently, gestured exaggeratedly, and seemed to expect applause for every simplistic argument. John realized that arrogance was a natural trap. Overconfident people make mistakes an attentive observer can exploit. He remembered books on behavioral psychology, where small provocations reveal hidden insecurities. Applying this in court was not just theory, it was practice. He knew patience and observation, combined with perfect timing, could turn every flaw of the opponent into a golden opportunity. As the trial progressed, the atmosphere grew heavier. John's client was visibly nervous, and every pause in the courtroom seemed to increase his anxiety. John realized he needed to stay calm, not just for himself, but to convey confidence to his client. Experienced lawyers know that transmitting trust is as important as legal arguments. He began mentally planning how to reverse each critical point, anticipating every objection from his opponent. The tension was rising, and he knew every second counted to maintain control of the situation. The courtroom was a stage where every movement mattered. The way John held documents, how he responded to questions, even his posture conveyed subtle messages. He observed every detail of his opponent, signs of impatience, changes in tone, hesitation when explaining certain facts. Every element was a map of possibilities. He could turn small inconsistencies into powerful arguments as long as he remained alert. And that's exactly what separates promising young lawyers from ordinary ones, the ability to see the invisible. Midway through the trial, a key witness seemed confused and insecure. John noticed the pressure on her was intense, but there was an opening. He could guide the narrative to reveal the truth everyone else was ignoring. This required finesse. Pressing too hard could cause distrust. Being too subtle could lose the chance. He took a deep breath and began articulating questions strategically, almost like a conductor leading an orchestra, to extract every detail that could turn the game in his client's favor. The environment seemed to conspire against him. Experienced lawyers trying to destabilize, judges with little patience, the audience watching every misstep. But John saw each challenge as an opportunity. He remembered stories of famous lawyers, how small details had changed seemingly impossible cases. For instance, a simple inconsistency in documents or a nervous witness could be the key to victory. He stored these references like a mental treasure, ready to use at the exact moment, like holding winning cards without ever revealing the hand. Even with everything against him, John maintained emotional control. He understood that the perception of competence often outweighs the reality of facts. If he appeared lost, the court would already mentally condemn the client. So every gesture, every word, every pause was calculated to convey confidence and intelligence. He observed his opponent, calculated the next move, and patiently waited for the opportunity to turn adversity into advantage. This patience itself was an invisible but powerful strategy. As the trial approached its critical moment, John felt he needed to act intelligently but not hastily. He had already studied all possible scenarios and noticed every exploitable gap. Every piece of evidence presented could be used in his favor as long as it was precise. And while the opponent boasted of the apparent victory, John silently planned the move that would change everything, setting the stage for the next step, the moment of tension that would define the game. After the first phase of the trial, John withdrew to a quiet corner of the courtroom where he could think without interruption. There, alone, he began reflecting on every detail of what had happened. Every glance, every word, every hesitation of the witnesses played in his mind like a movie. He knew that the tension was not only external, but also internal. He needed to control his emotions and turn anxiety into focus. This is a skill few develop, but it separates good professionals from extraordinary ones. He took a deep breath, reminding himself that even when everything seems lost, there is always a strategic way out. As he analyzed the case, John began to identify patterns that no one else had noticed. Small details that seemed insignificant, a contradiction in a testimony, a misinterpreted word, a partially ignored document, became potential weapons. He knew that these elements, when applied correctly, could turn the game around. This is a secret life teaches. Observing minutiae that go unnoticed is what creates unique opportunities. He mentally noted each point, preparing for the right moment to act. Time was running, and the pressure was mounting. Every lost minute could cost his client dearly. John felt the weight of the courtroom on his shoulders, but he also realized that tension could be an ally. In critical moments, a focused mind, capable of perceiving details invisible to others, makes all the difference. He mentally reviewed possible strategies, adjusting each approach according to his opponent's reactions. It was like a chess game. Every move is calculated, anticipating responses and preparing counterattacks. And John knew that checkmate would require patience and precision. To maintain focus, he relied on simple yet powerful techniques: deep breathing, visualizing the desired outcome, and mentally reorganizing each argument. At the same time, he planted small clues that would later appear as coincidences but would reinforce his strategy. This skill of silent preparation is a hallmark of masters in any field. It is not just about reacting, but anticipating. Every gesture, every word, even the subtle ones, could be decisive at the moment when all seemed lost. Meanwhile, in the courtroom, his opponent continued to display exaggerated confidence, unaware that every action left gaps. John knew that within someone else's arrogance lay opportunity. He mentally studied how to exploit each mistake, hesitation, and excess of self-confidence. A single overlooked detail, a poorly guided witness, a flaw in document presentation, any of these small pieces could be the turning point. And he knew that every second of observation brought him closer to his chance to surprise everyone. John also used this moment to connect with his client. It was crucial that his client sensed calm and confidence, even if everything seemed against them. He silently explained strategies that no one else heard, providing reassurance without drawing attention. A calm client is often a silent ally in building unexpected victories. And this makes all the difference in high-pressure environments where nervousness and fear can spread quickly and influence crucial decisions. During this period of reflection, he recalled previous experiences, cases where small observations had led to extraordinary results. He compared mentally, analyzed each detail, and assessed which techniques could be applied in that specific moment. Tension was not the enemy, but fuel. Every second of waiting, every minute of deep analysis increased his preparation and reinforced the confidence that cunning could prevail, even when all seemed lost. Observing from afar, John also noticed small signs of fatigue and distraction in his opponent. A slight stumble in speech, an expression of impatience, an unnecessary pause, these all indicated vulnerability. He knew the right moment to act had not yet arrived, but these small clues were valuable, and he stored them mentally for when the turning point finally came. Tension, therefore, was not just a challenge, but a hidden opportunity. He began mentally outlining the plan that would turn each small weakness he observed into strategic strength. Every detail of the courtroom, every behavior noted, and every partially ignored piece of evidence would be pieces of a puzzle only he could assemble. External pressure only sharpened his senses, making him more alert, faster, and more perceptive. The courtroom, with all its tension, became a laboratory of cunning and intelligence, and John was the meticulous scientist analyzing every variable. And so, as the clock ticked and the courtroom awaited the next move, John remained immersed in his reflection, attentive to every detail, every gesture, every tiny opportunity. The sense of urgency did not paralyze him. On the contrary, it prepared him for the moment when he could turn tension into decisive action. Every observation, every insight, every silent connection he made was laying the groundwork for the next step, the moment that would reveal his cunning in a surprising way and turn the game around. Young John began to mentally sketch out his plan, every detail meticulously considered, as if he were playing a three-dimensional game of chess. He knew he couldn't reveal everything immediately, as surprise was part of the strategy. Every argument would be a silent arrow, every question a key to open doors that seemed closed. He recalled situations where experienced lawyers relied too heavily on obvious evidence and overlooked subtle nuances. And John knew the trick lay precisely in this. Turning small, ignored details into major breakthroughs. He noticed that one piece of evidence presented by his opponent contained an almost imperceptible flaw. Few would notice, he thought, but he knew that, with a strategic approach, this could become his turning point. John planned to ask indirect questions, manipulating the flow of the trial to lead everyone to see the inconsistency only at the right moment. Cunning isn't just about spotting flaws. It is about exploiting timing and the other person's expectations in your favor. This required patience, calm, and almost surgical precision. To reinforce his plan, he mentally reviewed every witness, every document, and every argument from his opponent. He identified pressure points where he could induce errors or reveal contradictions naturally. The preparation was invisible but powerful. While everyone else watched the courtroom, John was building the path to the decisive strike. He knew that for every mistake of his rival, he needed a calculated response. A question that would lead to revelation without seeming forced. A crucial detail lay in interpreting a complex contract which his opponent had assumed was indisputable. John realized that, with a well-placed question, he could reveal an overlooked ambiguity. He rehearsed mentally every word, every tone, every pause. He knew that when executed correctly, this simple intervention could shake his opponent's confidence and trigger a domino effect, leading everyone to recognize the weakness of the opposing argument. This is the essence of cunning. Small gestures, huge impact. While reviewing his plan, John also considered the reaction of the court and the audience. Every move needed to be convincing and every step calculated. He knew that if he showed hesitation, part of the effect would be lost. And if it was too obvious, the opponent would anticipate it. So he planned to act subtly, using everyone's attention against them. This silent strategy required more than intelligence. It demanded perception, emotional control, and perfect timing, skills he had been developing throughout his career. He also thought about ways to disarm his opponent's arrogance. Small, almost casual questions could make him slip without realizing it. John knew that provoking the opponent strategically was a powerful but delicate technique. Too much pressure, and he would react defensively. Too little, and nothing would change. So every question, every comment, would be calibrated to achieve the desired effect, always keeping control of the narrative. Victory lay in patience and calculation. To reinforce his plan further, he drew on details from previous trials that no one remembered. He observed patterns of behavior, lapses in attention, involuntary gestures, and minor communication errors. All of this would be used to his advantage, creating a web of evidence and strategic questions converging at the moment of the turning point. John knew that often it is not the strongest who wins, but the most attentive, observant, and intelligent, and he was ready to prove it. The moment to execute the plan had not yet arrived, but John already felt the tension transforming into energy. He knew that when the right time came, every detail he had prepared silently would explode in impact. The key was to wait for the exact instant. Acting too early could be ineffective, waiting too long could be disastrous. So he remained vigilant, calculating every variable and adjusting his plan mentally. Every breath was part of the preparation for perfect execution. He also considered alternatives and contingency plans. Even the most perfect cunning requires flexibility. If something didn't go as expected, he had to react intelligently and quickly. John visualized alternative scenarios, mentally rehearsed responses, and strategic adjustments. This exercise not only strengthened his confidence, but also increased his chances of success. After all, true cunning isn't improvisation, it's strategic preparation combined with creativity under pressure. As he prepared, John felt that every piece of the board was finally in place. He knew that all elements were ready to converge, that the opportunity to turn the game around was near, and while everyone in the courtroom remained fixated on the apparent superiority of his opponent, he stayed calm, patient, and vigilant, waiting for the moment when his intelligence would become visible to all, turning tension into imminent victory. The moment had arrived. John rose slowly, every movement calculated, every gesture filled with intent. The entire courtroom held its breath, unaware that the young lawyer was about to turn the game around. He began asking seemingly simple, almost casual questions, yet each carried a strategic purpose. His opponent started to sweat, hesitate, and realize something was wrong. Every detail John had studied, every silent observation, and every piece of evidence meticulously analyzed, now became a lethal weapon. The audience and the court felt the tension transform into palpable anticipation. The questions guided the narrative almost imperceptibly, yet devastatingly. John exposed small inconsistencies in documents, prompted witnesses to reveal overlooked details, and built a line of reasoning that no one had noticed until then. He spoke calmly, every word chosen as if it were a chess piece. His previously confident opponent now struggled to regain composure, but every move seemed to deepen his own defeat. And while everyone was still processing what was happening, John smiled subtly, knowing his cunning was finally becoming visible. The judge, who had seemed impassive until then, began to notice the emerging pattern. Every detail John revealed dismantled the rival's argument. The tension grew, but John maintained his serenity. This strategic calm is something few master. It conveys authority and intelligence, even in critical situations. And as the audience leaned in to absorb every detail, John continued guiding the narrative with precision, like a conductor orchestrating the perfect symphony of evidence and arguments. The opponent tried to regain control, but it was already too late. Every question John had asked had woven an invisible web trapping his rival. One poorly chosen word, a minimal hesitation, and the opponent's confidence began to crumble. John knew exactly when to press and when to hold back, creating moments of tension that maximized the impact of each revelation. It was like watching a chess game, where every move led to the opponent's inevitable defeat, but only at the right moment, making John's victory not just effective, but unforgettable. The audience was stunned, realizing that the young lawyer had not merely reacted, but transformed an apparently lost situation into a display of intelligence and insight. Rival lawyers exchanged incredulous glances. Witnesses whispered to each other, and the entire courtroom seemed hypnotized by the sequence of revelations dismantling the initial argument. Every calculated detail, every strategically placed silence, heightened the impact of the turnaround. John had turned tension into a spectacle of cunning. The final line of argument was a masterstroke. John presented overlooked evidence, a small flaw in the contract, which clearly demonstrated that the client had been unjustly accused. The opponent tried to respond, but his words sounded hollow against the clarity of John's reasoning. The court, which had previously seemed biased against him, now watched silently, absorbing every detail, and disbelief slowly turned into respect. This is the beauty of a strategic turnaround. It doesn't shout victory, it proves it beyond question. John's cunning wasn't only in discovering his rival's flaw, but in the way he shaped everyone's perception. Every carefully presented detail, every strategic question, and every calculated pause had built an invisible path to victory. He knew that often the ability to guide others' perceptions is more powerful than any argument's strength. And in that moment, everyone in the courtroom understood that the victory wasn't just his client's, but a triumph of intelligence and preparation that few possess. The defeated opponent tried to justify himself, but every attempt sounded weak. The judge, impressed by the clarity and precision of John's evidence, recognized the injustice of the case. The tension that had hung over the courtroom from the start began to dissolve, replaced by a reverent silence. It was as if everyone finally saw the young lawyer in a new light, acknowledging not only his competence, but the brilliance of his silent strategy. The turnaround was complete and striking. John remained firm, calm, and controlled until the very last moment, demonstrating that victory is not just a matter of luck, but of applied intelligence, patience, and observation. He transformed adversity into opportunity and underestimation into strategic advantage. Every gesture, every word, and every pause had a purpose, culminating in an unexpected and memorable outcome. The entire courtroom stood witness to a silent lesson. Never underestimate those who observe, learn, and wait for the right moment. And so, while disbelief still lingered in the air, John concluded his presentation with unwavering calm. He knew he had not only won, but taught a lesson in cunning and intelligence that would remain in everyone's memory. Every carefully planned detail had hit its target, and the unexpected turnaround, which no one saw coming, had finally materialized. The audience, still absorbing what they had witnessed, could hardly imagine that this was only the beginning of the impact his cunning would create. John received the silent recognition he had long deserved. It wasn't exaggerated applause or ostentatious praise, but the respect in the eyes of judges, lawyers, and witnesses spoke louder than words ever could. He remained humble, knowing that every victory is just a step in life's ongoing lesson. This is a posture anyone can adopt, achieve with intelligence, but never underestimate the value of discretion and humility. After all, true impact often comes from quiet yet memorable actions. As he left the courtroom, John reflected on the justice and intelligence that had guided him. He understood that winning wasn't just about being right, but about knowing when to act with strategy and attention to detail. This is a powerful lesson. In life, it's not always the strongest or the fastest who wins, but the one who observes, learns, and acts with cunning. He knew that every future challenge would demand the same level of patience, strategy, and courage, and this understanding strengthened his confidence for the steps ahead. He also realized that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. Every tense moment in the courtroom had tested not only his legal knowledge, but also his emotional resilience. This is a skill anyone can cultivate, facing adversity without losing focus, maintaining mental clarity and determination. He recalled historical cases where courage combined with intelligence transformed destinies, understanding that he was walking the same path, building his own story of success. John knew that cunning is a silent but powerful skill. He reflected on how small details can be decisive and how careful observation can reveal invisible opportunities. This is a lesson applicable to any area of life: business, personal relationships, or creative projects. Observe, analyze, wait for the right moment, and act precisely. This is the formula for turning difficulties into victories. He smiled, knowing that all who witnessed his performance would, even unconsciously, learn about the power of attention and strategic planning. As he walked through the courthouse corridors, John considered the importance of applying knowledge practically. Knowing theories or recognizing injustice isn't enough. One must act, plan, and execute intelligently. This is a key difference between those who dream and those who achieve. He drew inspiration from great names in law and history, but also knew that every victory requires adapting to the reality of the moment. Deliberate practice, combined with constant observation, produces extraordinary results. John also thought of his client, whose confidence had been shaken by the challenges faced. He knew that conveying security and assurance was as important as winning, technically. This is something anyone can apply in life. Supporting, inspiring, and guiding those around you not only increases your chances of success, but also strengthens relationships and creates lasting positive impact. He reflected that often an individual's victory is only complete when it benefits those who trust them. The young lawyer understood that each victory strengthens not only reputation, but also character. He realized that facing challenges, observing details, planning and acting strategically is more than winning cases. It's learning about oneself and the world. This reflection is something anyone can cultivate. Every difficulty is an opportunity for growth, every obstacle an invitation to creativity and resilience. He recognized that his success was the result of discipline, courage, and applied intelligence, valuable lessons for all of us. As he walked away, John considered how cunning can transform seemingly lost situations into unique opportunities. He knew immediate recognition isn't always visible, but the sense of justice and control over challenges is rewarding. This is a universal lesson. Patience, observation, and silent preparation can produce unexpected and memorable results. He reflected that anyone can apply this in life, learning to wait for the right moment and act intelligently. John also felt that the experience reinforced the importance of confidence and preparation. Every step had been considered, every movement anticipated, and every detail analyzed. He knew that true victory lies not just in the final result, but in how the process is conducted. This is a powerful message. Applying strategy, emotional intelligence, and patience in any situation significantly increases the chances of success, whether in courts, business, or personal life. And he knew this lesson would last forever. As he left the courtroom, John sent a silent message to all who had witnessed his performance. Cunning, observation, and courage can turn any situation around, even when everyone seems against you. He knew that winning isn't merely a matter of luck or talent, but of applying knowledge strategically and humanely. This is the great lesson anyone can take into their own life, inspired by the discipline, patience, and intelligence John demonstrated. And as he walked, he was already planning his next challenges, ready to face whatever came.